I was sitting at my own birthday dinner, watching my boyfriend of 2 years lean across the table to whisper something in my best friend's ear while I cut my cake. Everyone else was laughing at some joke I'd missed, but all I could see was the way Trevor's hand lingered on Mia's shoulder, how she giggled and looked down at her plate like they were sharing some private secret. When I asked what was so funny, Trevor straightened up and said it was nothing, just something about work. Mia nodded quickly and reached for her wine glass, avoiding my eyes completely. That's when I realized the weird energy I'd been feeling for weeks wasn't in my head. My boyfriend and my best friend had been playing a game right in front of me, and I'd been too trusting to see it. My name is Kiera, and before everything went wrong, I believed loyalty was something you earned through kindness. I worked as a nurse at Portland General Hospital, pulling 12-hour shifts in the cardiac unit where every day meant the difference between someone going home to their family or not. The work was exhausting, but it gave me purpose in a way most jobs never could. When I came home to my small apartment in the Pearl District, I'd often find Trevor already there, feet up on my coffee table, eating leftover takeout while scrolling through his phone. Trevor was a personal trainer who ran his own small gym downtown. We'd met 2 years earlier when I'd signed up for a membership after working too many double shifts and realizing I hadn't exercised in months. He was charming in that easy way some men have, quick with compliments and always ready with a solution to whatever problem you mentioned. Within 3 months, he had his own key to my apartment and a permanent spot in my daily routine. My best friend Mia had been part of my life since college. We'd roomed together senior year, survived organic chemistry and clinical rotations, and celebrated when we both passed our nursing boards on the first try. She worked at a different hospital across town, but we still met for dinner at least twice a week and texted constantly about everything from work drama to what we were watching on Netflix. She was the person I called when I needed to vent about difficult patients or when Trevor did something thoughtful that made me feel lucky to have found him. If this kind of betrayal story resonates with you, make sure you're subscribed. These situations happen more often than people want to admit. The first sign I missed was 3 months before my birthday dinner. Mia had started asking more questions about Trevor than usual. Not the normal girlfriend checking in questions, but specific things about his schedule, his clients, whether he was happy with his business. At first, I thought she was just being a good friend, maybe considering switching gyms or looking for someone to train her sister who was visiting from Seattle. But then she started showing up at places where Trevor and I hung out. The coffee shop near his gym where we'd meet after my morning shifts. The park where we'd go running on weekends. Always with a reasonable excuse, always acting surprised to see us there, but showing up just often enough that Trevor started joking about how we should just invite her to everything since she seemed to have the same schedule as us. The second warning came during a night out 6 weeks before my birthday. We were at a bar in the Alberta district, one of those places with craft cocktails and dim lighting that made everyone look more attractive than they probably were. I'd gone to the bathroom, and when I came back, I found Trevor and Mia deep in conversation at our table. They were sitting closer than friends normally do, and when they saw me approaching, they immediately shifted apart and changed the subject to something about the music being too loud. I asked what they'd been talking about, and Mia said they were just discussing some mutual acquaintance from Trevor's gym. But there was something in the way she said it, too casual and rehearsed, that made me wonder if they'd been planning what to tell me if I asked. I let it go because I trusted them both and because questioning your boyfriend and best friend felt like admitting you were the kind of person who didn't deserve loyalty. That night, Trevor was more affectionate than usual, holding my hand during the walk home and telling me how much he appreciated having someone who trusted him completely. At the time, it felt romantic. Looking back, it felt like guilt disguised as gratitude. My 20th birthday fell on a Saturday, and I'd planned what I thought would be a perfect small celebration. Dinner at Ox Restaurant, the Argentine place downtown that I'd been wanting to try for months. Just me, Trevor, Mia, and 2 other close friends from work. I'd made the reservation weeks in advance and even bought a new dress, something elegant in deep blue that made me feel confident and celebratory. The evening started normally enough. Everyone arrived on time, the restaurant was beautiful, and the conversation flowed easily over wine and appetizers. I felt happy in that specific way you do when all your favorite people are in one place, laughing at each other's stories and making you feel like the center of something warm and genuine. But as the night went on, I started noticing small things that felt off. The way Trevor kept refilling Mia's wine glass before checking if anyone else needed more. How she'd touch his arm when she laughed at his jokes, just brief contact but more than necessary. The way they seemed to be having side conversations through glances and raised eyebrows while the rest of us were talking about other things. The moment that broke everything open happened when our server brought out my birthday cake, a chocolate creation I'd been excited about all week. Everyone started singing happy birthday, and as I was making my wish and blowing out the candles, I caught Trevor and Mia looking at each other instead of me. Not just looking, but sharing some kind of meaningful eye contact that made my stomach drop even as everyone else was clapping and congratulating me. When I asked Trevor to help me serve the cake, he said he'd do it in a minute, then immediately turned back to continue whatever conversation he'd been having with Mia about workout techniques. I stood there holding the cake knife, feeling invisible at my own birthday dinner, while my boyfriend explained proper deadlift form to my best friend like it was the most important topic in the room. That's when Mia laughed at something he said and put her hand on his thigh under the table. Just for a second, but I saw it. And I saw him not move away. I excused myself to go to the bathroom, but instead of going back to the table, I stood in the restaurant's hallway and called an Uber home. I texted the group saying I wasn't feeling well, probably something I ate, and asked them to continue the celebration without me. My phone immediately buzzed with concerned messages, but I turned it off and spent the 20-minute ride home staring out the window at the city lights, trying to process what I'd just witnessed. Back in my apartment, I sat on my couch still wearing my birthday dress and felt something I'd never experienced before. Not heartbreak, which I'd expected, but a cold, clarifying anger that made everything suddenly make sense. The casual questions about Trevor's schedule. The convenient encounters at our usual places. The way they'd both been acting slightly guilty around me for weeks, without any reason I could identify. I wasn't sad. I was furious. But underneath the anger was something deeper and more painful. I'd spent 2 years building a relationship with someone who apparently found it easy to betray me, and 5 years maintaining a friendship with someone who was willing to help him do it. These were the two people I trusted most in the world, and they'd been conducting some kind of emotional affair right in front of me while I made dinner plans and worried about their happiness. I remembered something my mother told me after my father left when I was 15. She said some people think kindness is the same as weakness, and they'll keep taking advantage until you show them the difference. I'd never understood what she meant until that moment, sitting alone in my apartment on my birthday while the two people who were supposed to care about me most were probably deciding whether to continue the party without me. By the time Trevor came home 3 hours later, I'd made a decision. I wasn't going to confront them or have a dramatic scene or ask for explanations that would probably be lies anyway. I was going to find out exactly how deep this betrayal went, and then I was going to make sure they both understood what it felt like to lose something important. The next morning, I woke up with a plan that felt both simple and satisfying. I called in sick to work, claiming a stomach bug from my birthday dinner, and spent the day doing research. If Trevor and Mia were involved in something beyond friendship, they'd have left traces. People always think they're more careful than they actually are. I started with their social media. Nothing obvious on the surface, but when I looked more closely at the timing of their posts, patterns emerged. Photos from the same locations on the same days, even when they claimed to be doing separate activities. Comments on each other's posts that were just slightly too flirtatious for friendship. Mia had even liked several shirtless photos Trevor had posted from his gym, something I'd noticed before but dismissed as normal supportive friend behavior. The real breakthrough came when I remembered that Trevor had left his laptop open on my dining table a few weeks earlier. He'd been working on some client scheduling system and asked to use my Wi-Fi because his apartment's internet was spotty. I'd helped him connect to my network, which meant his laptop might still be automatically connecting when he came over. That evening, when Trevor arrived at my apartment with apologies about the night before and a replacement birthday cake from the grocery store, I casually asked if he wanted to work on his computer while I made dinner. His laptop immediately connected to my Wi-Fi, and while he was in the shower, I checked the router logs on my phone. Sure enough, his system had been backing up data to a cloud service, and with a little technical knowledge from my ex-boyfriend who worked in IT, I was able to access the backup files. What I found made my decision easy. Text message threads between Trevor and Mia going back 4 months. Not just friendly conversation, but increasingly intimate exchanges about their feelings for each other, their physical attraction, and their frustration with having to hide it from me. Mia had written things about me that I couldn't have imagined her thinking, calling me naive and saying I'd probably never notice anything because I was too busy with work to pay attention to my own relationship. But the worst part wasn't the betrayal itself. It was discovering that they'd been planning to let this continue indefinitely. Trevor had no intention of breaking up with me because he liked the stability and support I provided. Mia didn't want to end our friendship because she valued having someone to vent to about work stress. They'd figured out a way to have their emotional and physical relationship while keeping me as a convenient third party who took care of the practical aspects of their lives. They thought I was too nice, too trusting, and too busy to ever figure out what they were doing. They were wrong on all counts. I spent the next week acting completely normal while I put the final pieces of my revenge plan into place. The key was understanding what mattered most to each of them, and then targeting those things with precision. For Trevor, it was his reputation as a trustworthy trainer and the small business he'd spent 3 years building. For Mia, it was her professional standing at the hospital and the image she'd cultivated as someone reliable and ethical. The first phase began on a Tuesday morning. I discovered that Trevor had been having an affair with another client besides Mia, a married woman whose husband paid for her personal training sessions as an anniversary gift. The text messages on his laptop showed that this had been going on for 6 months and that he'd been using his gym after hours for these encounters. I printed out screenshots of their conversations and mailed them anonymously to the woman's husband, along with security camera timestamps showing when Trevor's gym was accessed outside of normal business hours. I also sent copies to the state licensing board that regulated personal trainers, with a formal complaint about ethical violations and inappropriate relationships with clients. The second phase targeted Mia's professional reputation. As nurses, we were held to strict ethical standards both at work and in our personal lives. Having an affair with someone else's partner might not be illegal, but it violated the moral turpitude clause in our employment contracts, especially when it involved deliberate deception and manipulation of a colleague. I compiled all the evidence of Mia's relationship with Trevor, including the text messages where she specifically discussed deceiving me and maintaining our friendship as a cover for her behavior. I sent this information to her supervisor at the hospital, along with a detailed timeline showing how she'd used information about my work schedule to plan meetings with my boyfriend. But the most satisfying part of my plan was personal. I organized a dinner party for the following Saturday, ostensibly to make up for the disaster of my birthday celebration. I invited Trevor, Mia, and several mutual friends, but I also invited 2 special guests, Trevor's business partner who co-owned the gym, and Mia's older sister who worked as a nurse manager at another hospital and had always been protective of Mia's reputation. During dinner, I stood up to make a toast. I thanked everyone for coming and said I wanted to share some exciting news about people we all cared about. Then I announced that Trevor and Mia had been secretly dating for 4 months and were clearly very happy together, based on the sweet text messages they'd been sharing about their relationship. The room went completely silent. Trevor's business partner looked confused and asked what I meant about them dating when Trevor was supposed to be with me. Mia's sister looked back and forth between Mia and me, clearly trying to understand what was happening. That's when I pulled out printed copies of their text messages and handed them around the table, explaining that I discovered their relationship by accident and wanted to help them celebrate their love publicly since they'd been too modest to share the news themselves. Trevor tried to claim the messages were fake, but his business partner recognized his writing style and some of the specific references to gym clients and schedules. Mia tried to minimize the situation by saying they'd just been friends who got a little too close, but her sister wasn't buying it, especially after reading the messages where Mia had called me pathetic for not noticing what was happening in my own relationship. By the end of the evening, Trevor's business partner was asking serious questions about what other ethical violations might be happening at their gym, and Mia's sister was lecturing her about professionalism and treating people with basic respect. Everyone else left early, clearly uncomfortable with the drama, but also visibly shocked at what Trevor and Mia had been doing behind my back. The consequences unfolded over the next several weeks like dominoes falling in exactly the sequence I'd planned. Trevor's gym lost 3 major corporate contracts when word spread about his inappropriate relationships with clients. The married woman's husband was a lawyer who threatened to file civil charges unless Trevor agreed to close his business and leave the city. The state licensing board launched an investigation that would take months to resolve, effectively ending his career as a personal trainer. Mia faced a formal disciplinary review at her hospital for conduct unbecoming a healthcare professional. While she wasn't fired immediately, she was transferred to a different department and lost the promotion she'd been working toward for over a year. Her sister, who was well-connected in the local nursing community, made sure that Mia's reputation for dishonesty and betrayal followed her to any potential new job opportunities. But the most satisfying consequence was personal. Trevor and Mia's relationship, which had seemed so exciting and passionate when it was secret, fell apart completely once it was exposed to scrutiny. Without the thrill of deception and the safety net of my friendship to fall back on, they discovered they didn't actually have much in common beyond their mutual willingness to betray someone who trusted them. I moved to a new apartment in a different neighborhood, something I'd been considering for months, but had put off because Trevor preferred my current place. The new space was smaller, but had better light and a view of the mountains that reminded me every morning that there was a whole world beyond the small, dishonest bubble I'd been living in. 3 months after the dinner party, I was working a night shift when I ran into Mia at the hospital cafeteria. She looked tired and older than her 28 years, and when she saw me, she tried to start a conversation about how sorry she was and how much she missed our friendship. I listened politely for about 30 seconds, then told her I hoped she'd learn something about the difference between loyalty and convenience. That was the last conversation we ever had. People always ask if I feel bad about destroying their lives so thoroughly, and the honest answer is no. What I feel is satisfied in a way that simple confrontation never could have provided. Trevor and Mia made calculated decisions to betray someone who had only ever supported them, and they did it while pretending to care about my well-being and happiness. The most important thing I learned is that kindness without boundaries isn't actually kindness at all. It's just weakness disguised as virtue, and people like Trevor and Mia can sense it from miles away. They chose me as a target because they thought I was too nice to fight back effectively, too busy to pay attention to what they were doing, and too emotionally invested in them to risk losing their friendship and relationship. They were wrong about all of that, but especially about the last part. You can't lose something that was never real in the first place. What I lost was the illusion that being good to people guarantees they'll be good to you. What I gained was the knowledge that I'm capable of protecting myself when necessary, and that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is make sure people face the real consequences of their choices. If you're listening to this and recognizing yourself in any part of it, understand that betrayal says nothing about your worth and everything about their character. But how you respond to betrayal says everything about yours. Choose accordingly.